The crystalline spires of Apex Prime Station refracted starlight into 10,000 colors as Aaron Chen made his way through the diplomatic quarter. 15 years. 15 years since humanity had taken its provisional seat in the Galactic Confederation, and he could still feel the weight of those measuring gazes whenever he entered the council chambers. The amphitheater sprawled before him like an ancient coliseum, tiered seats descending toward the central speaking platform in rings that corresponded to military capability scores. The Confederation's member species had long ago decided that power flowed from the barrel of a mass driver, and the seating arrangement reflected that philosophy with brutal honesty. The Catharian Dominion occupied the lowest tier, their sleek forms barely visible through personal shield generators. The Torellian Compact held the second ring, their delegation's ceremonial armor gleaming with threat displays. Humanity sat in Tier 679. Aaron climbed the steps with measured dignity, his posture betraying nothing of his former life in military intelligence. That career belonged to another man, before the diplomatic corps had recruited him for his ability to read tactical situations disguised as political theater. He'd traded field analysis for formal receptions, but the skills remained sharp beneath the ambassador's polished exterior. Ambassador Chen. The voice crystallized from the air itself. President Savarix's native language was pure resonance through silicon lattices. The translation matrix embedded in Aaron's neural interface rendered it as formal standard galactic. We are pleased you could join us for this emergency session. Aaron inclined his head to the glowing geometric form that represented the Confederation's current leadership. Crystalline species lived for millennia. Savarix had held the presidency for longer than humanity had possessed spaceflight. Thank you, Mr. President. I came as soon as I received the summons. The matter concerns your species' colonial holdings, Savarix continued, light patterns shifting across his faceted surface. Specifically, the 3 worlds you've established in the Outer Reach territories. Aaron felt his pulse steady into the familiar rhythm of crisis management. He'd expected this conversation for months, ever since Phyrexian scout ships had begun probing the region. New Nairobi, New Beijing, and Nova São Paulo, legally established colonies under Confederation Charter, surveyed and registered 12 years ago. Legally established under human interpretation of disputed survey rights. The new voice rolled like thunder across stone. Warlord Threxus rose from the 23rd tier, high enough to command respect, low enough to hunger for more. The Phyrexian stood 9 feet tall when he straightened to his full height, armored scales catching the light like polished obsidian. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where only the strong survived to breed, and they'd carried that philosophy to the stars with devastating efficiency. 17 species conquered in 2 centuries. The number hung in the air like an accusation. Warlord Threxus. Aaron kept his tone neutral, professional. I wasn't aware the Phyrexian hierarchy had filed a counterclaim on those territories. We are filing it now. Threxus descended the tiers with predatory grace, each step a statement of physical dominance. He stopped at the speaker's platform, still a full tier above Aaron's position. The Outer Reach falls within what we have designated as Phyrexian expansion space. Your presence there is inconvenient. Ambassador Chen's people filed proper survey documentation 12 years ago. A new voice interjected. Ambassador Kylara spoke from the tier beside Aaron's, her Minari physiology allowing her to project calm despite the tension. The insectoid diplomat's compound eyes reflected concern in the infrared spectrum. Surely that grants them settlement priority under Article 23? Article assumes the claiming species has the capability to defend their claims. Threxus's teeth, rows of serrated bone meant for rending flesh, showed in what might have been a smile. The Confederation recognizes military capability as the foundation of territorial rights. Your species ranks 679th among members, 47 patrol vessels scattered across 3 colonies. Perhaps the humans should reconsider their position before a stronger species is forced to clarify matters. The chamber fell silent. A dozen species shifted in their seats, uncomfortable with the naked threat but unwilling to challenge it. The Vrexian hierarchy commanded nearly 200 warships, and no one wanted to be next on their conquest list. Aaron studied Threxus with the same analytical detachment he'd once applied to enemy force deployments. The warlord was playing to the room, establishing dominance through physical intimidation and the implicit threat of violence. Classic apex predator behavior, effective on species that evaluated threat through size and display. Humanity had learned different lessons. Mr. President, Aaron said calmly, I believe this matter requires formal mediation under Confederation Charter. The Vrexian hierarchy is welcome to present their historical claims to the Outer Reach territories. We will, of course, present our own documentation showing continuous human presence for over a decade. Documentation? Threxus laughed, the sound like rocks grinding together. Your species has been spaceborne for barely a century. The Vrexian hierarchy has claimed territory across 17 star systems. We understand the natural order of the galaxy. The strong take what they can hold, and the weak surrender what they cannot defend. You humans with your fragile bones and short lifespans, you are evolutionary accidents that somehow achieved faster than light travel before natural selection could correct its mistake. You speak of documentation when you should be speaking of evacuation schedules. Aaron felt Kylara's attention shift toward him, waiting for the explosion of human pride that Threxus was trying to provoke. Instead, he simply clasped his hands behind his back and looked up at the warlord with the same expression he might use to examine a mildly interesting insect. The documentation stands, warlord, as does humanity's legal claim to our colonies. Then let me be clear. Threxus gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the speaking platform. It showed the Outer Reach region in tactical overview. 3 human colony worlds marked in blue, surrounded by empty space that was rapidly filling with red markers, Vrexian fleet positions. We are claiming this territory as part of our natural expansion. It is, after all, largely unused space. Your 3 small colonies represent an inefficient use of valuable resources. 400,000 people live in those colonies, Aaron said quietly. 400,000 humans. Threxus made a dismissive gesture. Your species breeds quickly to compensate for your short lifespans. You can replace them. The question is whether you will relocate them peacefully or whether we'll be forced to remove them. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. That sounds remarkably like a threat against Confederation citizens, warlord. Kylara's voice carried an edge that made several nearby species lean away from her. The Minarii were known for their strict adherence to law and their willingness to defend it. It is a statement of territorial priority. Threxus turned his attention to President Sevarix. Surely the Confederation recognizes that established military powers should not be impeded by recent arrivals who lack the strength to maintain their claims. The crystalline president's surface patterns shifted through colors that indicated deep consideration. Aaron recognized the political calculation happening in real time. Sevarix didn't want a conflict with the Vrexian hierarchy, especially not over humanity's 3 colony worlds. The path of least resistance would be to suggest the humans relocate and avoid an incident. Ambassador Chen, Savaric said slowly, perhaps your government might consider the practical realities of the situation. The Confederation values peace above territorial disputes. Surely suitable alternative locations could be found for your colonies. Relocation assistance could be provided through the appropriate channels. There it was, the polite suggestion that humanity abandon 400,000 citizens because fighting for them would be inconvenient. Aaron took a slow breath, letting the moment crystallize. This was the decision point, the place where humanity would either establish itself as a species worthy of respect or be forever relegated to the role of galactic footnotes. His training in military intelligence had taught him to recognize when a conflict was inevitable and how important it was to ensure your opponent chose to start it. With respect, Mr. President, we will not be abandoning our people. He kept his voice level, calm, as if discussing agricultural quotas rather than the lives of 400,000 souls. New Nairobi, New Beijing, and Nova São Paulo are legally established colonies under Confederation Charter. We will defend our legal rights through appropriate channels. Appropriate channels. Threxis's laugh echoed through the chamber. You mean your 47 defensive platforms? Your species' entire military couldn't stop a single Vrexian battle group. This is the problem with allowing primitive species into the Confederation before they've matured. You haven't learned yet that the galaxy respects only strength. Perhaps, Aaron said quietly, we simply have different definitions of strength. Then, let me educate you. Threxis gestured again, and the holographic display changed. Now it showed a human research outpost, a small station on an uninhabited moon in the outer reach. Aaron recognized it immediately. Deep Space Survey Station Kepler, an unmanned facility with a crew of 15 scientists, had a crew. Past tense. The hologram showed 3 Vrexian warships approaching the station. No warning, no communication, just weapons fire that tore through the station's civilian-grade shields like tissue paper. The structure broke apart in silence, debris scattering across the moon's surface in a slowly expanding cloud. 15 scientists, 15 people who'd been studying stellar formation patterns and cataloging mineral deposits, gone in 17 seconds. A demonstration, Threxis said, his tone suggesting he was discussing the weather, of Vrexian resolve. Consider it an educational experience, humanity. Learn what happens when weak species refuse to acknowledge their betters. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Murder of civilians violated a dozen Confederation laws, but no one was quite ready to say it out loud. Not when the murderer commanded 200 warships. Aaron stared at the hologram, forcing himself to watch every second of the destruction. 15 people. 15 families who would receive notification that their loved ones were dead because the galaxy's political structure rewarded strength and punished weakness. He felt something cold settle in his chest, a familiar weight from his military days. The moment when restraint became liability, when patience became permission. Not yet, not quite yet. Warlord Threxis, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos with sudden clarity. I will relay your demonstration to my government. I suspect they will have questions about the legal status of that action under Confederation law. Legal status? Threxis leaned forward, looming over the platform. Here is the only law that matters in the outer reach. The Vrexian hierarchy claims that territory. You have 30 standard days to evacuate your colonies. After that, we will remove your presence by whatever means necessary. And humanity will learn what 17 other species have learned. that the Vrexian hierarchy takes what it wishes, and those who resist become property for 3 generations. Your international law calls it slavery. We call it teaching proper respect. The word hung in the air like poison gas. Several delegates audibly gasped. The Minarii delegation's antennae flattened against their heads in distress. Even species that had been unwilling to challenge Threxus looked disturbed. Slavery of Confederation members was forbidden. That law had been written in blood after the hegemonic wars 3,000 years ago, when a slave empire had nearly consumed the galaxy. The law existed not from moral principle, but from bitter experience. Enslaved species became desperate, and desperate species became dangerous. But Threxus was exploiting a loophole the Confederation pretended didn't exist. Conquered peoples who never joined the Confederation weren't protected by its laws. The 17 species his hierarchy had subjugated had been absorbed before they could apply for membership. Legally, technically, they had never been Confederation citizens at all. What made the delegates gasp was not the slavery itself. That horror had been happening for 2 centuries while the Confederation looked away. What shocked them was Threxus threatening to do it to a member species openly in the council chambers. It was a declaration that his people considered themselves above even the carefully constructed fictions that let the Confederation pretend it had principles. 400,000 people, Aaron repeated softly, given 30 days to abandon their homes or face enslavement for 3 generations. He looked up at Threxus and for the first time let something show through his diplomatic mask. Not anger. That would be expected, dismissed as emotional weakness. Instead, something colder, the analytical certainty of a man who just watched his opponent make a catastrophic mistake. We will not abandon our people, warlord. I strongly suggest you reconsider this course of action. Threxus's laugh was like an avalanche. Or what, human? Your 47 ships will stop my fleet? Your species that lacks claws, lacks armor, lacks natural weapons of any kind? Your barely evolved prey animals that stumbled into space technology? The Vrexian hierarchy has conquered civilizations that made your kind look like insects. This is your only warning. Evacuate or accept the consequences. Aaron held the warlord's gaze for a long moment, then he nodded slowly as if accepting an inevitable conclusion. 30 days, he said, and may your gods have more mercy on you than you've shown to others. He turned and walked back up the tiers toward the exit, Kylara falling into step beside him. Aaron, she said quietly, her compound eyes reflecting genuine concern in the infrared, what will your government do? Aaron Chen, career diplomat and former military intelligence officer, allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Honestly, I suspect they're going to do what humans have always done when someone threatens our families. Which is, remind the galaxy why we survived long enough to reach the stars in the first place. Aaron Chen stood before the full Confederation assembly, every one of the member species represented in the vast amphitheater. The emergency session had been called at humanity's request, a formal invocation of their rights under Confederation Charter. The air hummed with tension and curiosity. In 15 years, humanity had never made such a demand. Mr. President, honored delegates, Aaron began, his voice carrying through the translation matrices with perfect clarity. Humanity requests formal adjudication of territorial claims in the Outer Reach under Article 23 of the Confederation Charter. He gestured, and holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber. Survey data, settlement records, communications logs, 12 years of documented human presence in the region, time-stamped and verified by Confederation monitoring stations. Our colonies, New Nairobi, New Beijing, and Nova São Paulo, were established in accordance with all proper protocols. Survey teams confirmed no prior claims existed in the region. Settlement permits were filed and approved. Aaron's tone remained calm, professional, as if presenting a routine administrative matter rather than defending 400,000 lives. The Vrexian hierarchy's claim of ancestral territory is demonstrably false. Their first scout ships entered the region 9 years ago, 3 years after our initial settlements. Warlord Threxus rose from his seat, scales rippling with what might have been amusement. Documents, always documents with your kind. Tell me, Ambassador, do your papers stop plasma fire? Do your settlement permits deflect mass drivers? They establish legal precedent, Aaron replied evenly, which I believe still matters under Confederation law. Law. Threxus descended toward the speaking platform with deliberate slowness. The Confederation recognizes one law above all others. The strong take what they can hold, and the weak surrender what they cannot defend. You humans persist in this delusion that words matter more than weapons. It is endearing, like watching a child insist that wishing will make something true. Then let me be clear about our position. Aaron's voice dropped several degrees in temperature. Humanity has, until this moment, chosen to demonstrate only those capabilities we deemed necessary for peaceful coexistence. We have avoided revealing certain aspects of our defensive doctrine out of respect for Confederation stability and our desire to be seen as partners rather than threats. A murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. Several species leaned forward with sudden interest. We are giving you this warning, Warlord, because we hope you will choose wisdom. Aaron met Threxus's gaze without flinching. What you mistake for weakness is restraint. What you interpret as fear is patience. We are offering you one final opportunity to withdraw your claims peacefully and avoid what will otherwise be a regrettable conflict. For a moment, Threxus simply stared at him. Then the warlord threw back his head and laughed, a sound like boulders grinding together, echoing through the chamber with savage amusement. Regrettable? For whom exactly? Threxus gestured, and his own holographic display appeared above the platform. Let me show you what happens to human restraint when it encounters Vrexian military doctrine. The hologram showed tactical simulations, human colonies under orbital bombardment, defensive satellites shredded by coordinated fire, population centers reduced to rubble within hours. The simulations played with clinical precision, demonstrating exactly how 32 Vrexian warships would dismantle humanity's defensive networks. Your species is an evolutionary failure, Threxus continued, his tone shifting to something that resembled a lecture. No claws, no natural armor, no venom, no enhanced strength, no biological weapons of any kind. You survived on your primitive world through sheer luck. You happened to develop tool use before something with actual evolutionary advantages hunted you to extinction. And now you've stumbled into a galaxy full of species that evolved for conquest, and you expect documents to protect you. Ambassador Kylera rose from her seat, antennae quivering with distress. Warlord Threxus, surely there is room for compromise here. The Confederation's strength lies in our diversity, in our ability to resolve conflicts through dialogue rather than... The Minarii would speak of compromise, Threxus interrupted. Your kind have been compromising for 3,000 years, which is why you've never expanded beyond your original star system, despite having the technology to do so centuries ago. You mistake cowardice for wisdom. He turned back to Aaron. Humanity will learn what 17 other species have learned. The Vrexian hierarchy takes what it wishes. Your entire species will be a footnote in Vrexian glory. Perhaps we'll keep a few of you in museums as examples of what happens when weak species refuse to acknowledge their betters. Aaron stood perfectly still for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried an edge that made several nearby delegates shift uncomfortably. We gave you every opportunity to choose peace, Warlord. We provided documentation. We offered negotiation. We warned you that what you see is not the full measure of humanity's capabilities. He pulled out his personal communication device, a simple gesture that somehow felt weighted with significance. You have chosen to interpret our restraint as inability, our patience as fear, our desire for peace as weakness. His fingers moved across the device's interface, sending a single encrypted message. The gesture was unhurried, almost casual, but something about it made the chamber fall silent. Withdraw now, Warlord Threxus. Return to Vrexian space. Accept diplomatic resolution to this territorial dispute, or accept full responsibility for what follows. Threxus's laugh could have shattered glass. Responsibility? I accept full credit for teaching your species its place in the galactic order. He straightened to his full 9-foot height, looming over the platform. The Vrexian fleet departs for your colonies in 1 hour. You have 30 days as promised. After that, your people will learn to kneel, or they will learn to die. Those are the only choices. Mr. President, Aaron turned to face Severix's glowing crystalline form. Humanity formally requests Confederation intervention under the Territorial Protection Clauses. The Vrexian hierarchy is threatening military action against legally established colonies. President Severix's surface patterns shifted through colors that indicated deep discomfort. Ambassador Chen, the Confederation's policy of non-interference in bilateral disputes is well established. Unless both parties request mediation, then we request mediation, Aaron said firmly. The Vrexian hierarchy does not, Threxus interjected. We have made our position clear. The humans may evacuate peacefully or be removed by force. There is nothing to mediate. Severix's colors dimmed slightly. In the absence of mutual agreement to mediation protocols, I'm afraid the Confederation cannot intervene in what is technically a territorial dispute between member species. Article 47 is quite explicit on this matter. Aaron felt Kylara's distress in the infrared spectrum, saw the nervous shifting of a dozen other species in the upper tiers. They understood what was happening. The Confederation's political structure rewarding military strength over legal precedent, allowing aggressive species to intimidate newer members without consequence. Then humanity will defend its legal rights through its own capabilities, Aaron said quietly. And we will remember which species stood for law and which stood aside. He turned and walked toward the exit, each step measured and deliberate. Behind him, he heard Threxus order his fleet commanders to begin departure procedures immediately, not even waiting for the session to adjourn. The warlord wanted everyone to see that he could ignore Confederation protocol with impunity. Kylara caught up with Aaron outside the chamber, her compound eyes reflecting genuine fear. Aaron, you cannot face a Vrexian battle group with 47 defensive platforms. This is suicide. Perhaps, Aaron said softly. Or perhaps we've been underestimated for long enough. The Vrexian fleet of 32 warships dropped out of faster-than-light transit at the edge of the new Nairobi system with the confidence of predators approaching wounded prey. Warlord Threxus commanded from his flagship Dominator, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction as his sensors mapped human defensive positions. 5 orbital platforms, 47 defensive ships scattered throughout the system, 3 small surface-based shield generators protecting the main population centers. Pathetic, he muttered. Begin attack approach. Target the platforms first. I want their defensive network destroyed in the first salvo. Then, we'll demonstrate what happens when mammals try to play at warfare. Governor Zoe Martinez stood in New Nairobi's command center, watching the same tactical displays with considerably more composure than the Vrexians expected. She was a compact woman in her 50s, her gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, her posture that of someone who'd spent 30 years in Earth's military before retiring to colonial administration. All platforms report ready, her tactical officer announced. Civilian shelters at 96% capacity. Emergency protocols engaged. Hold fire until they're committed, Zoe ordered calmly. Let them think they know what we have. The Vrexian fleet advanced in a standard conquest formation, heavy battleships in the front to absorb initial fire, faster cruisers positioned to exploit breakthroughs, support vessels hanging back to coordinate targeting. It was the same formation they'd used to conquer 17 species. Why change what worked? The first Vrexian salvo lit up the void, plasma torpedoes and particle beams lancing toward the nearest human platform. Defensive shields flared, absorbed the impact, held for exactly as long as Confederation standard military shields should hold before collapsing. The platform shuddered, listed to one side, began venting atmosphere in a visible plume. Target disabled, a Vrexian tactical officer reported. Their shields are even weaker than estimated. Continue, Threxus ordered. Destroy all 5 platforms within the hour. That was when the damaged platform rotated on its axis with sudden, impossible precision and returned fire. The projectile crossed the distance between platform and battleship at a significant fraction of light speed. A tungsten alloy slug accelerated by magnetic fields that had been deliberately masked to look like standard Confederation mass driver technology. It wasn't. The Vrexian battleship's shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and slow conventional projectiles, encountered something they'd never been built to handle: a relativistic kinetic kill vehicle with impact energy measured in gigatons. The shield held for exactly 1.3 seconds before the projectile punched through and struck the battleship's forward armor at 45,000 kilometers per second. The ship didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist as a functional warship, its entire forward section converted to expanding plasma, its reactor containment failing, its crew dead before their neural interfaces could register what happened. 4 more platforms fired. 4 more battleships learned why humanity had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of throwing rocks at each other with increasing violence. In 17 minutes, 8 Vrexian warships were crippled, not destroyed precisely, but reduced to drifting hulks that would require months of repairs. The remaining 24 vessels hastily broke formation and retreated beyond the platform's engagement range. Aboard the Dominator, Threxus stared at his tactical display with something that might have been respect warring with rage. "They've been hiding this," he said slowly. "Clever mammals. They built platforms that look primitive but house weapons beyond Confederation standard. This is their advantage, their trick they've been holding in reserve." His tactical officer looked uncertain. "Warlord, those weapons are extraordinarily precise. They disabled our ships without destroying them. That suggests—" "That they lack the power for kill shots," Threxus interrupted. "They're trying to seem more capable than they are, hoping to frighten us into withdrawal. Pathetic." He straightened. "Commit the reserve fleet. 40 additional warships. If they want to play at war, we'll show them what numbers mean in military strategy." "Sir, perhaps we should—" "Do you question my command?" Threxus's tone could have frozen helium. No. Warlord. Transmitting orders now. Aaron Chen watched the battle feeds from Apex Prime Station, standing in a private observation room with Kylara and 3 other ambassadors who'd requested emergency briefings. The holographic display showed New Nairobi's orbit in tactical detail, disabled Phyrexian warships drifting amid debris clouds, human platforms holding position, no human casualties. 8 warships crippled in 17 minutes, Ambassador Kylara breathed. Aaron, what are those weapons? The Confederation's top militaries would need hours to achieve such precision. Railguns, Aaron said quietly. Mass drivers enhanced with targeting systems developed over 10,000 years of humans shooting projectiles at each other. We're quite good at it. He paused, something unreadable passing across his features. Those are our conventional weapons. The ones we're willing to use against an opponent we're still hoping will choose surrender. A Canorian delegate, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation, spoke up. But your military capability score, you ranked 679th. This is at least top 200 level technology. We ranked 679th in declared military capability, Aaron corrected gently. The Confederation's scoring system assumes species reveal their true strength. We chose not to make that assumption. On the display, new markers appeared. 40 Phyrexian warships transitioning into the system to join the remaining 24. They're committing reserves, Kylara observed. Threxis isn't retreating. Aaron's expression remained neutral, but something cold flickered in his eyes. He activated his communication interface and delivered a message that was immediately broadcast on all Confederation news frequencies. Warlord Threxis, this is Ambassador Aaron Chen. We have demonstrated that your assumptions about human military capability were incorrect. 8 of your warships have been disabled with minimal casualties. We are still holding back. We are still offering you a path to peaceful withdrawal. Take your fleet and return to Phyrexian space. We've demonstrated restraint. You still have time to choose wisdom. The response came 3 minutes later. Threxis's face appearing on every broadcast channel with a sneer of contempt. You've revealed your hidden weapons, human. Congratulations. Now watch what happens when real military power is applied. He gestured off-screen. All ships begin orbital bombardment of colonial population centers. Let's see how brave the mammals are when their children are burning. Aaron's jaw tightened. Around him, the other ambassadors recoiled in horror. He's targeting civilians, Kylara whispered. That's a war crime under 17 different Confederation articles. He knows we'll hesitate to return fire while our people are in danger, Aaron said softly. He's betting that we value individual lives more than military victory. He's not entirely wrong about that. On the tactical display, the Phyrexian fleet began moving into bombardment positions, but something else was happening. Human defensive platforms were reconfiguring in real time, their modular design revealing its true purpose as they shifted from railgun batteries to point defense networks capable of intercepting incoming fire. Governor Martinez, Aaron said into his communicator, you are authorized to reveal full defensive capabilities. Protect your people. Copy that, Ambassador. Zoe Martinez's voice came back, steady as granite. They want to see what we can do? Let's educate them. The platforms opened fire again, but this time not at warships. Targeting lasers locked onto every incoming torpedo, every plasma bolt, every projectile the Phyrexians launched toward the planet. Point defense systems that had been deliberately concealed created an impenetrable sphere of interception fire. Not a single bombardment weapon reached New Nairobi's atmosphere, and while the Phyrexians focused on their failed attack, human cargo ships that had been drifting innocuously through the system dropped their camouflage. 47 ships became 73 as stealth vessels appeared on sensors, each one launching clouds of autonomous drones that began systematically dismantling Vrexian sensor arrays. The battle turned into a lesson in asymmetric warfare. While Threxus commanded his fleet to maintain bombardment efforts, human forces demonstrated technologies the Confederation had never seen coordinated so effectively. Cyber intrusion packages that made Vrexian targeting computers feed false data to their own ships. Quantum-entangled communication systems that let human forces coordinate instantaneously across light years. Stealth technology that violated several supposed laws of physics. Within 72 hours of engagement, the Vrexian fleet had lost 31 warships, disabled, not destroyed, captured with their crews alive and unharmed wherever possible. 0 human casualties. Not one colonist touched by enemy fire. Across the Confederation, news networks broadcast every moment. Species that had dismissed humanity as weak watched in growing shock as the fragile mammals systematically dismantled a military force that had conquered 17 civilizations. In the Minari embassy on Apex Prime, Ambassador Kylara gathered her staff for an emergency session. "The humans are winning," her military attaché reported, "but they're alone. If more Vrexian forces arrive, then we help them," Kylara said simply. Her staff stared at her. "Ambassador, the Confederation's non-interference policy has allowed 17 species to be enslaved while we wrote strongly worded resolutions." Kylara's antennae flattened with conviction. "I've watched Aaron Chen for 15 years. He's been building toward this moment, hoping it would never come. The humans didn't want this war, but now that it's here, they're fighting it the way they fight everything, with everything they have, and with more restraint than their enemies deserve." She activated her communication array. "I'm contacting the Turellians, the Dranith, and everyone else who's watched the Vrexians expand for 2 centuries while we did nothing. If humanity can stand alone against an empire, the least we can do is stand with them." Within 6 hours, 5 species had committed support vessels to the human defense, not because the Confederation authorized it, but because individual ambassadors, watching the same broadcasts as everyone else, decided that some things mattered more than political convenience. And then, Warlord Threxus, facing the humiliation of military defeat and the collapse of Vrexian dominance, made the decision that would define his species' fate. He captured a civilian transport carrying 300 human colonists and broadcast a simple message: "Surrender immediately, or I will execute all hostages. You have 1 hour." The holographic image filled the Confederation Council chambers. 300 human civilians held at gunpoint aboard a Vrexian vessel, fear evident on every face. Children clinging to parents, elderly colonists trying to maintain dignity, medical staff standing protectively near the injured. Warlord Threxus stood among them, his massive form a deliberate contrast to their vulnerability. "Your advanced technology means nothing if you lack the will to use it," he addressed the cameras. "Surrender your colonies within 1 hour, or watch these humans die. Then I will hunt down the next transport, and the next, until you learn that mercy is weakness and compassion is failure." Aaron Chen stood in the council chamber, every delegate watching him with varying degrees of horror, sympathy, or calculating interest. The entire galaxy waited to see how humanity would respond to having their greatest strength, their valuing of individual lives, turned into a weapon against them. For a long moment, Aaron said nothing. Then he straightened, and when he spoke, his voice carried across every Confederation communication channel with crystalline clarity. "Warlord Threxus, you have mistaken our restraint for inability. You have mistaken our patience for fear. You have interpreted our desire for peace as weakness. Every step of this conflict you have chosen. Every escalation, every atrocity, every violation of the laws you claim to respect, you have chosen these paths. His voice remained calm, but something fundamental had shifted in his demeanor. The diplomat's mask was gone, replaced by something older, harder, forged in 10,000 years of human warfare. We gave you warnings. We gave you documentation. We gave you opportunities to withdraw. We disabled your ships rather than destroying them. We protected your crews when we could have killed them. We did all of this because we hoped that you would choose wisdom. He paused, and the silence stretched across the galaxy. You have executed civilians. You have threatened children. You have taken hostages and declared your intention to commit mass murder unless we surrender our people to slavery. Aaron's eyes were cold as winter void. Stand down now. Return those civilians unharmed and face only justice. Continue this path and face humanity unconstrained. Threxus laughed, that grinding boulder sound that had intimidated so many species before. Unconstrained? Show me what? The broadcast cut off, not because of technical failure, because someone had taken control of the Vrexian ship's communication systems remotely and terminated the feed. In those 17 seconds of severed communications, before the human cyber intrusion could fully penetrate his ship's isolated systems, Threxus made his final choice. He knew what the fleet appearing on his sensors meant. He knew his military defeat was inevitable, so he ensured humanity would remember the cost of their restraint. By the time human specialists restored the feed, 300 hostages lay dead in the cargo hold. Not executed with weapons, the Vrexians hadn't had time for that. Threxes had simply vented the compartment to vacuum. 300 men, women, and children. Their last moments a desperate scramble for air that wasn't there. The galaxy witnessed Threxus standing over the viewport, watching the bodies drift past, his expression utterly without remorse. You wanted to see humanity unconstrained, he said to the cameras the humans had forced back online. Now you'll see them grieve. And while Threxus was savoring his hollow victory, his tactical officer was staring at the sensor display in mounting horror. Warlord, we're receiving new contacts, multiple faster-than-light transitions. I'm counting. 847 human warships appeared across the 3 colony systems simultaneously, dropping out of FTL transit with the precision of a synchronized heartbeat. Not 47 ships, not 73 partially revealed vessels. 847 warships, every one of them larger, better armed, and more advanced than anything the Confederation had seen humanity deploy. Aboard the Dominator, Warlord Threxus understood in that moment what every extinct empire in galactic history had understood too late. Humanity had never been weak. They'd simply been patient. The Vrexian armada emerged from faster-than-light transit in a formation designed to inspire terror. 196 warships, every vessel the hierarchy could muster, arranged themselves in concentric spheres of overwhelming firepower. Warlord Threxus stood on the bridge of the Dominator, watching his tactical displays with grim satisfaction. He'd recalled every ship, stripped every garrison, committed his civilization's entire military might to this single engagement. It would be enough. It had to be enough. Sensors show human defensive positions ahead, his tactical officer reported. Wait. Warlord, I'm reading 847 contacts, capital-class vessels, military configuration. They're in perfect formation. Threxus felt something cold settle in his chest. 847, one for every species in the Confederation. The symbolism was deliberate, unmistakable. The mammals were sending a message. "They've revealed their hidden fleet," he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "Good. Let's destroy it all at once and be done with this farce." But as his sensors provided more detailed analysis, the cold feeling spread. These weren't the defensive platforms and converted cargo vessels that had bloodied his advance forces. These were purpose-built warships, each one larger than his flagship, their hulls incorporating materials his databases couldn't identify. Their formation was mathematically perfect. No wasted movement, no gaps, every firing angle calculated with precision that made his own tactical computers seem primitive by comparison. And behind them, positioned in support roles, were Minari vessels and Turellian ships and representatives of 5 other species who'd apparently decided humanity's cause was worth fighting for. "Open a channel," Threxus ordered. "Let me speak to whoever commands this fleet." The holographic display activated, and Aaron Chen's face appeared, but he wasn't on Apex Prime anymore. He stood on a warship's bridge, crew stations visible behind him, the calm efficiency of a military command center humming in the background. "Warlord Threxus," Aaron said quietly, "you were warned. Multiple times. You chose not to listen." "You were hiding this all along," Threxus snarled, "playing weak while building an invasion fleet. The Confederation will see you for the threat you truly are." "We weren't hiding, Warlord. We simply didn't advertise." Aaron's expression remained neutral, but something ancient looked out through his eyes. "Every ship you see was constructed in human space and stationed there as planetary defense. The Confederation's capability rankings measure power projection, ships deployed beyond home systems, fleets positioned for expansion. We ranked 679th because we never positioned our forces for conquest. We positioned them for protection. The distinction matters." "It doesn't matter," Threxus said, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. "You're still outnumbered. My fleet has 200 ships, battle-tested crews, weapons proven on 17 conquered worlds. Whatever tricks you used against my advanced forces won't work when we commit everything." Aaron was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made species across the Confederation lean forward in their homes, offices, and government chambers as they watched the broadcast. "You're right that we used tricks, Warlord. Restraint was a trick. Patience was a trick. Appearing weak was a trick. Humans have been playing those tricks for 10,000 years. They're how we survived long enough to reach the stars. But you've forced us to stop tricking you." He gestured, and the human fleet's formation shifted. Not much, just enough to show the absolute precision of their coordination, the way 847 ships could move as a single organism. "This is your final warning. Surrender now. Release the hostages unharmed. Stand down your fleet. Face justice under Confederation law. Or learn what happens when humans stop holding back." Threxus's laugh came out harsh, desperate. "You think you can intimidate me with formation drills? All ships attack pattern Omega-7. Destroy the humans' precious fleet and then burn their colonies to bedrock. Show them what real power." The human fleet opened fire. Threxus had expected plasma torpedoes, particle beams, mass driver volleys, the standard armaments of galactic warfare. What he got instead was a lesson in physics that the Confederation's military theorists had dismissed as impossible. Gravitational shear weapons tore at reality itself, creating tidal forces that pulled Vrexian ships apart from the inside without touching their hulls. Armor designed to deflect energy and stop kinetic impacts offered no protection against fundamental forces. Warships simply came apart, their structures failing at stress points as gravity itself became weaponized. AI-assisted targeting systems predicted Vrexian movements before they happened, analyzing engine outputs and command patterns to determine where ships would be, rather than where they were. Vrexian evasive maneuvers put them directly into human firing solutions with uncanny consistency. Adaptive armor absorbed hits and reconfigured in real-time molecular structures, shifting to counter whatever weapon struck them. The few Vrexian shots that connected did superficial damage at best. But the most devastating weapon wasn't physical at all. Human cyber warfare packages infiltrated Vrexian networks with surgical precision, not just disabling systems but subverting them entirely. Tactical computers began broadcasting Vrexian battle plans directly to human commanders. Secure communications channels became conduits for human intelligence gathering. Threxus watched in horror as his own ships reported his orders to the enemy before his crews could execute them. "Sir, we're being boarded." The report came from 6 ships simultaneously. "Hostile forces appearing inside our hulls. How are they bypassing our shields?" Because human stealth technology didn't just mask ships from sensors. It allowed boarding craft to phase through shields as if they weren't there, and the humans who poured out of those craft moved with a precision that spoke to centuries of urban warfare, close-quarters battle, and hostage rescue operations refined across 100 different Earth conflicts. Within 4 hours, 140 Vrexian warships were disabled and captured. 56 more were destroyed when their crews chose suicide charges rather than surrender. The remaining ships drifted powerless, their systems locked down by human cyber attacks, their crews alive but helpless. And through it all, human medics treated Vrexian wounded. Human engineers stabilized damaged life support systems. Human commanders transmitted prisoner of war protocols and ensured captured crews received food, water, and communication access to their families. The Confederation watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated total military dominance while extending systematic mercy to their enemies. Aboard the Dominator, Threxus stared at his tactical display with eyes that no longer saw clearly. His fleet was gone. His military strength shattered. His species' position in the galactic order destroyed in less time than it took to cook a meal. "Warlord," his second-in-command said quietly, "we should surrender. There's no shame in—" "No." Threxus's voice was hollow. "Vrexians do not surrender. We do not kneel. If we cannot win, we deny the enemy their victory." He reached for the self-destruct controls, intending to detonate the Dominator's reactors while drifting close enough to New Nairobi to kill millions. A final act of defiance, a final demonstration that Vrexian pride could not be broken. His hand touched the controls and nothing happened. "Override accepted," an artificial voice announced through his ship's communication system. "Command authority transferred. Ship systems now under external control." The bridge doors exploded inward with surgical precision. Breaching charges that knew exactly how much force to apply, enough to incapacitate defenders without destroying critical systems. Smoke grenades flooded the space with obscuring clouds. And through that smoke came figures in powered armor, moving with the controlled violence of special forces operators who trained in every environment humans had ever fought in. Governor Zoe Martinez entered last, her own armor scarred from the boarding action, a plasma rifle held with casual competence. The gray-haired colonial administrator who'd spent the last 5 years managing agricultural quotas and infrastructure development moved like a woman who'd spent decades before that leading some of Earth's most elite military units. "Warlord Threxus," she said calmly, "you are under arrest for war crimes, murder of civilians, and attempted genocide. You have the right to legal representation under Confederation law. Medical treatment will be provided for your injuries. Resist, and we'll use necessary force to restrain you." Threxus looked at the dozen weapons trained on him, at the humans who'd infiltrated his flagship and seized his command center with embarrassing efficiency. He thought about fighting, about dying on his feet rather than facing justice. Then, he saw something that broke through his rage. One of the human soldiers carefully stabilizing a wounded Phyrexian officer, applying emergency medical treatment with the same care they'd show their own people. "Why?" he whispered. "Why show us mercy?" Zoe Martinez's expression softened slightly. "Because becoming like you would mean you'd already won, Warlord. Now come quietly, or we'll carry you out. Either way, you're facing trial." Before the broadcast, in a private moment on the Indomitable's observation deck, Aaron Chen stood alone, watching the stars. His hands trembled slightly, something they hadn't done since his first combat deployment decades ago. 300 people. Dead because he'd gambled that restraint would work. Dead because he'd believed that showing mercy would inspire Threxus to show mercy in return. He'd been wrong. Admiral Hassan found him there, staring at nothing. "Ambassador, the broadcast is ready. Give me a moment." Aaron's voice was hoarse. I need a moment." "Sir, the galaxy is watching. They need to hear from 300 people, Admiral." Aaron turned, and Hassan saw something he'd never seen before in the diplomat's eyes. Genuine anguish. "I told myself that if we just demonstrated restraint, if we just showed him there was another way. But he killed them anyway. He killed them because I gave him time to do it." Hassan was quiet for a long moment. "You couldn't have known." "Couldn't I?" Aaron's laugh was bitter. "I've studied Threxus for years. I knew what he was. I knew what his culture valued. And I still hoped." The word came out like a curse. "Hope is a luxury, Admiral. Those 300 families are paying for my hope." "So, what would you have done differently?" Hassan asked quietly. "Attacked immediately? Killed every Phyrexian without warning? Become exactly what they expected us to be?" Aaron didn't answer. "Those people died because Threxus chose cruelty," Hassan continued. "Not because you chose wisdom. If you'd attacked without restraint, yes, maybe those 300 would be alive, but we'd have killed thousands of Phyrexian crew members. We'd have proven to the galaxy that humans are just another species that solves problems with overwhelming violence. And the next time a species threatened us, they'd know there was no point in surrendering, because humans don't take prisoners." "That's a cold equation, Admiral. War is cold equations. You know that better than anyone." Hassan stepped closer. "You didn't fail those people, Ambassador. You gave them a chance to live in a galaxy where their deaths meant something, where humanity proved that we're better than our enemies. That's not nothing." Aaron stood silent for a long moment, grief and duty warring across his features. When he finally spoke, his voice was steadier, but something in his eyes had changed. The certainty that had carried him through 15 years of diplomacy was cracked now, held together by will rather than conviction. "The broadcast," he said. "Let's get it over with." What he said next would be remembered across the galaxy, but those who knew him best would always remember that it was spoken by a man who had learned in the hardest possible way that principles had costs. The broadcast originated from the bridge of the human flagship Indomitable, transmitted across every Confederation communication channel. Aaron Chen stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his diplomatic attire replaced by the simple uniform of humanity's fleet command. Behind him, Admiral Hassan coordinated the final securing of captured Phyrexian vessels, his crisp orders a counterpoint to Aaron's measured words. To the Confederation's member species, to the citizens of every world watching these events, humanity did not choose this conflict. We gave warnings. We offered negotiations. We demonstrated restraint at every opportunity. But when restraint was mistaken for weakness, when patience was interpreted as fear, when our desire for peace was weaponized against us, we responded. His expression remained calm, but something fierce burned beneath that composure. You are witnessing what happens when a species that survived 10,000 years of warfare against itself finally stops holding back. Humans refined the art of killing other humans across countless conflicts through weapons that evolved from sharpened stones to planet-killing arsenals. We learned strategy from Sun Tzu and Clausewitz and Aphelion. We learned tactics in trenches and jungles and urban ruins. We learned logistics by feeding armies across continents. We learned mercy by remembering what it cost when we forgot it. He gestured to the tactical displays showing disabled Phyrexian warships surrounded by human rescue vessels. We are not your masters. We are not your conquerors. We are your reminder that strength without wisdom leads only to extinction. Humanity came to the stars hoping to be better than our history, but we never forgot the lessons that history taught us. His voice dropped, became almost intimate despite being broadcast to billions. Let this be the galaxy's lesson. We are weak in the ways that don't matter, and strong in the ways you never imagined. We break easily, but heal stubbornly. We live briefly, but love fiercely. We lack claws and armor, but we built them from metals and mathematics. You saw our small size and short lifespans and assumed we couldn't matter. You forgot that wolves were once small too, before they became predators. You forgot that humans climbed to the top of Earth's food chain not by being strongest, but by being smartest, most adaptable, and most willing to cooperate. Aaron paused, letting that sink in. The Phyrexian hierarchy is defeated. Their military strength is broken. Their leadership will face justice. But the Phyrexian people, the civilians who had no say in their government's atrocities, they will be treated with dignity. That is humanity's choice. That is the kind of species we are trying to be. The Confederation Tribunal convened on Apex Prime in chambers designed to accommodate the 17 species that the Phyrexian hierarchy had enslaved over 2 centuries. Warlord Threxis stood in restraints, facing a jury composed of representatives from every civilization his people had conquered, 3 generations of survivors, families who'd grown up under Phyrexian occupation, children born into slavery who'd never known freedom. Aaron Chen sat in the observer's gallery, not as prosecutor but as advocate for proper legal procedure. When the Vorlian prosecutor argued for immediate execution without the usual appeals process, Aaron stood. If we bypass established justice to speed his punishment, we validate his philosophy that might makes right, he said quietly. If we become what he is in order to defeat him, we've lost the only victory that matters. The prosecutor, a Vorlian woman whose grandmother had died in Phyrexian work camps, stared at him with incomprehension. He murdered thousands of your people. He would have enslaved your entire species. And you want to give him appeals? I want to give justice its proper weight, Aaron replied. Not for his sake, for ours. Because the moment we decide some beings don't deserve legal rights, we become the empire we fought against. The trial took 3 weeks. Evidence presented with excruciating detail. Testimonies from survivors that made even seasoned observers weep. Records of atrocities committed across 17 worlds, 2 centuries, 3 generations. Threxis was convicted on all counts, sentenced to life imprisonment in a Confederation facility where he would face the knowledge of his crimes every day until death claimed him naturally. No martyrdom, no warrior's death, just long years to contemplate what his pride had cost his people. And the Vrexian people themselves, the civilians whose government had committed horrors in their name, received something unprecedented, an offer of reconstruction assistance. Human engineers helped rebuild their industrial infrastructure. Human educators established programs to help a warrior culture learn new values. Human diplomats negotiated their peaceful integration into a confederation that had learned painfully that writing off entire species created the conditions for future conflicts. The memorial on New Nairobi stood in a garden overlooking the sea, 300 names carved into stone that would outlast the colony itself. Aaron stood before those names with the families of the murdered hostages, his voice steady despite the weight of grief. They died because we chose restraint, because we valued law over vengeance, because we tried, even when it cost us, to be better than our worst instincts. He paused, looking at faces marked by loss. Some will say that proves restraint is weakness, that we should have struck harder, faster, without mercy. But those 300 people died because someone else chose cruelty, not because we chose wisdom. The blood is on Threxus's hands, not ours. And if we had abandoned our principles to save them, if we had become the monsters we fought, then we would have lost something more precious than lives. We would have lost ourselves. Governor Zoe Martinez stood beside him, her own eyes red but dry. They were my people, she said. My responsibility. And I agree with everything Ambassador Chen said, because I've seen what happens when soldiers forget their human first and weapons second. I've watched civilizations destroy themselves by winning wars but losing their souls. These 300 died free, knowing their species would not surrender its values to preserve them. That's a death with meaning. The wind carried the scent of salt and growing things. The colony would survive. The memorial would stand. And humanity would remember that strength without wisdom was just another word for extinction. 6 months later, the Confederation Council convened to vote on new military capability rankings. Humanity was officially elevated to 7th place, behind only species with populations exceeding 1 trillion. But more importantly, 16 species applied for admission to what was being called the Human Defensive Alliance, a mutual protection pact based on shared values rather than military might. Aaron Chen, still serving as ambassador, watched species that had once dismissed humanity as fragile mammals now line up to learn from human military doctrine, diplomatic philosophy, and that peculiar combination of mercy and lethality that had defeated an empire without becoming one. We're not weak, Aaron said to Kilara, his Minari colleague, as they watched the council session. We never were. We were just waiting for you to be ready to see us clearly. Kilara's antennae rippled with amusement. And now that we see you? Now, Aaron said with a slight smile, we teach the galaxy that there are worse things than being underestimated. Like failing to learn from the species who survived 10,000 years by being too stubborn to give up, too clever to fight fair, and too hopeful to stop believing things could get better. The council chamber buzzed with debate, alliance, and the slow transformation of a political order that had valued only strength. Humanity had broken that order by demonstrating that real strength, the kind that endured across centuries, came from knowing when to fight, when to restrain, and when to extend mercy to those who'd shown none. They were weak in all the ways that didn't matter, and strong in all the ways that did. 50 years later, the Memorial Plaza on New Nairobi had grown over the decades. What began as 300 names carved in stone now encompassed an entire district. Gardens, museums, and monuments dedicated not just to human losses, but to the vision that had emerged from them. Children of a dozen species played in the courtyards, their laughter echoing across spaces designed to honor the dead while celebrating the living. Admiral Aaron Chen, retired now for 15 years, walked the familiar paths with a cane he didn't strictly need but found comfortable. At 83, his hair had gone completely white, but his eyes remained sharp as they traced the names he'd memorized half a century ago. Behind him, a small delegation followed at respectful distance. Historians, journalists, and a young Vrexian named Thren, who served as cultural liaison for the reformed Vrexian Republic. Ambassador Chen, Thren said, using the title Aaron had held before his military promotion. The anniversary ceremony begins in 1 hour. The council president asked if you might offer remarks. Aaron paused at a particular section of the memorial wall, his fingers brushing across names that had become legends in the intervening decades. I've given enough speeches, Thren. Let the young ones speak now. They're the ones who've built on what we started. The young Vrexian, barely 40 by his species reckoning, born years after the war ended, shifted uncomfortably. My grandfather served under Threxus. He was among those captured at the Battle of New Nairobi. Your forces treated him with dignity despite what his commander had done. I remember the prisoner rosters, Aaron said quietly. Vrenthak, yes? Engineering officer on the flagship. Thren's eyes widened. You remember individual names? After all this time? I remember all of them. Ours and yours. Aaron resumed walking, his cane tapping a steady rhythm against the memorial stones. Your grandfather, Thren. He was one of the first Vrexians to volunteer for the reconciliation programs. Helped design the Joint Engineering Academy on Vrexian Prime. Taught human students for 20 years before he passed. He spoke of you, Thren said. Of the human who visited the prisoner compound and asked about their families, their homes, their hopes for the future. He said you seemed genuinely interested in understanding, not just defeating. I was. Aaron stopped at the center of the plaza, where a massive sculpture depicted figures of multiple species reaching toward shared light. We didn't fight to destroy the Vrexian people. We fought to stop what their government had become. There's a difference that matters. The plaza had filled gradually as they walked. Humans, Minari, Vrexians, and representatives of a dozen other species who joined the Human Defensive Alliance over the decades. What had started as 16 founding members now encompassed 43 species, bound not by military necessity, but by shared principles of mutual protection and peaceful cooperation. Kylera approached, her compound eyes reflecting the afternoon light. At her age, older than Aaron by a considerable margin in absolute years, though her species measured time differently, she'd become something of a living legend among the Minaria. The ambassador who had secretly supported humanity when no one else would, the diplomat who had helped draft the alliance charter that governed interstellar relations for 5 decades. Aaron. Her antennae rippled with warmth. I thought you'd retired from public appearances. I had. They keep dragging me back. He gestured at the crowds gathering for the ceremony. 50 years, Kylera. Half a century of peace. Not perfect peace, she reminded him gently. There were border disputes. The Krellin incident. The refugee crisis during the Outer Rim famines. But no wars. No extinctions. No empires building themselves on the graves of conquered peoples. Aaron watched a group of Vrexian children, 3rd generation, born into a society that had completely transformed from their grandparents' time, sharing snacks with human classmates. The alliance works because everyone knows what happens if it fails, and because enough species decided that cooperation was better than domination. Threxus had died in prison 23 years ago, having served the full term of his sentence without requesting early release. The records showed he'd spent his final years in quiet reflection, occasionally agreeing to interviews with historians studying the war. His last recorded words, preserved in the memorial archives, had been simple. "I was wrong. Not about strength. Strength matters, but about what strength means. The humans showed me that true strength protects rather than destroys. I wish I had understood earlier." His son, Vrex, had become one of the Reformed Republic's most prominent peace advocates. The family that once symbolized Vrexian military aggression now symbolized the possibility of genuine transformation. Vrex served on the Alliance Council alongside human and Minari representatives, his father's crimes acknowledged but not inherited. The ceremony will include recognition of the new Humanity Initiative graduates, Kailara said. 50 young people from 12 species who completed the joint education program this year, including Thren's daughter. Thren ducked his head in what Aaron recognized as Vrexian modesty. Solara wanted to study human history. She says understanding the past prevents repeating it. She's wise. Aaron looked at the young Vrexian with genuine warmth. Your species has come further in 50 years than most manage in 500. That's not nothing. We had help, Thren said quietly. More than we deserved, perhaps. Probably, Aaron agreed. But mercy isn't about deserving. It's about choosing the future over the past. The crowds continued gathering as the afternoon wore on. Aaron found himself surrounded by faces he recognized from decades of alliance building. Admiral Hassan's granddaughter, now commanding the Joint Fleet's flagship. President Liu's successor, 3 times removed, representing humanity's continued commitment to the values that had guided them through war and into peace. Leaders from the Dranith, who had stood with humanity when few others would, and whose species now occupied positions of influence throughout the Alliance's diplomatic corps. When the ceremony began, Aaron sat in the front row as an honored guest but declined to speak. Instead, he listened as younger voices told the story of what humanity had built. Not just military strength, but a vision of galactic civilization where strength served cooperation rather than domination. A Vrexian historian spoke of the Reformed Republic's transformation, acknowledging the crimes of the past while celebrating the progress of the present. A Minari artist unveiled a new addition to the memorial, a holographic display that would project the faces of those lost in the war, human and Vrexian alike, rotating through the names in endless remembrance. And a young human woman, great-granddaughter of one of the hostages who had died during Threxus's final desperate act, spoke of forgiveness. My family lost someone in this war, she said, her voice steady and clear. For years I was taught to hate the Vrexians, to see them as the species that murdered my great-grandmother. But then I met Thren's family. I learned that his grandfather had tried to stop the executions, had been punished for speaking out, had spent the rest of his life working for reconciliation. She looked out at the mixed crowd, at Vrexians and humans sitting together, at children who had never known a galaxy without the Alliance. We can't change what happened. We can't bring back the dead. But we can choose what happens next. My great-grandmother believed in humanity's mission, strength in service of peace, mercy toward those who seek redemption, and the patience to build what we want rather than just destroy what we fear. That's the legacy worth honoring. Aaron felt tears on his cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. 50 years of work, of doubt, of wondering whether they'd made the right choices. And here was the answer, in the form of a young woman who transformed family grief into galactic hope. After the ceremony, as the crowds dispersed and the evening light painted the memorial in golden hues, Aaron found himself alone at the central monument. The sculpture's figures seemed to glow in the fading sun, reaching eternally toward that shared light. You stayed," a familiar voice said. Aaron turned to find Kylara beside him, her movements slower than they'd once been, but her presence as steady as ever. "Old habits. This is where I come to think." "And what are you thinking?" He considered the question seriously, as he always did with her. "I'm thinking about a conversation I had with Threxus years after the war. He asked me why we didn't destroy his species when we had the chance. Complete extinction would have guaranteed they'd never threaten anyone again." "What did you tell him?" "That we'd tried extinction once. Among ourselves back on Earth. Whole cultures erased. Whole peoples destroyed. And all it did was teach survivors to hate more deeply." Aaron traced the memorial's edge with his fingers. "We learned that the only way to truly win is to create something that lasts. Not through fear, but through choosing to be better than our worst impulses." Kylara's antennae rippled thoughtfully. "And now, 50 years later, do you believe you succeeded?" Aaron watched a Vrexian family passing through the plaza, their children pointing excitedly at the monument's alien figures, asking questions their parents answered with patience and honesty. He saw human and Minaria diplomats walking together, their conversation animated and friendly. He felt the weight of 5 decades of peace, imperfect but persistent, built on the foundation of choices made when easier options were available. "I believe we created something that has a chance to last," he said finally. "That's all anyone can do. Plant seeds, tend the garden, and hope the harvest feeds generations you'll never see." Kylara placed one delicate limb on his arm, a gesture of deep affection in her species' culture. "The humans have a saying about that, don't they? Something about trees and shade?" Aaron smiled. "A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in." He looked at the memorial, at the names of the dead and the faces of the living, at a galaxy that had learned to choose cooperation over conquest. "I think I understand that now, better than I did when I was young and thought winning was enough." "It was never just about winning," Kylara said softly. "It was about what you did after you won. That's what the galaxy remembers." They stood together in the gathering dusk, 2 veterans of a war that had transformed everything, watching the lights of a peaceful city come alive around a memorial built to ensure such sacrifices would never be forgotten and never be repeated.